edition of Three True Values. I'm your host, James Fletcher, back with you to talk all things college basketball all around the country. We've got plenty going on, but we will lead off the show in this first segment by talking about the coaching change that is taking place at DePaul, the first, at least the first major job to come open this season. We're still in January and we have Tony Stubblefield out at DePaul. So we will talk about the potential candidates there. What does DePaul need to do? Because as we know, DePaul, at the bottom of the Big East, there's no other way to say it. They have struggled for almost 2 decades now, going back pretty much as long as these college athletes have been alive. That program has not been what it used to be. So we'll talk about that job. Is it important to get this done right now? Is this just a lost cause? We'll talk about that and what potentially they could get done this spring. Then we'll come back on the other side. We will talk about some of the coaches that are under pressure. All right. I don't want to say like some of these coaches maybe are hot seat candidates. Like we'll talk about that a little bit. But most of these that I'm going to talk about, they're not on the hot seat, but they're under pressure because of the expectations that are set either at their program or that they've set over the years about what they are able to get done each season. And there's some things that aren't going their way right now, and they have to turn them around. What do they need to do? We'll talk about that in the second segment, the coaches under the most pressure right now. Then in the third segment, as always, we will get you the games of the week and get you out of here for another week of college basketball to go off and enjoy. So as we lead into the show here, we are going to talk about this DePaul situation. DePaul parting ways with Tony Stubblefield yesterday afternoon. And so that was Monday for those of you listening to this, not as soon as it comes out, but there was very quickly, and this is with any coaching change, everyone starts to rack their brains around what makes the most sense for them to do. Are there any candidates with immediate ties to the program? Is there potentially a former player who is now coaching at a lower level they could bring up? Is there a free agent coach out there who makes a lot of sense to come in? There's a lot of debate about who makes sense for this job. And in some sense, you're always going to get the same group of candidates, and it rotates who they are, because there's always in college basketball, there's always going to be coaches who are on the upswing. There's going to be the young, hot, and up-and-coming coaches who have success at a small school. There's going to be your rebound coaches who have gone down to the mid-major level. Now they are dominating there, and you think, all right, well, they're ready for another chance at a bigger job. You've got your hot assistants. And then you've got your coaches who are away from the game right now. You've got your coaches who are, maybe they're in broadcasting. Maybe they've just taken a year or two off. Maybe they went to the NBA for a brief amount of time, either as a head coach or an assistant. Whatever the case is, you get this same group and you're pulling from these groups. Now, the names within those groups, obviously they rotate as these cycles change, as everyone gets new jobs each year. So right now, if we go through and we talk about that DePaul job, we got to get an understanding of what that job means. Because yes, it's a Big East job. It's a bigger job than most of the mid-major jobs that are out there. But it's also kind of the laughingstock of the Big East over the past 20 years. Last NCAA tournament appearance was 2004 for DePaul. So this is a program without much success. Historically, they have good success. They are positioned to succeed. They are in Chicago, obviously a recruiting hotbed, somewhere that you can convince players to come to, somewhere that in theory you have a base to create NIL funds, to create NIL opportunities. But what is it that's holding this program back? It's an interesting discussion because they've brought in some nice prospects. There are players in the NBA who went to DePaul. Javon, Freedom Liberty, he went to DePaul. You've got several others who have been there. They've gotten some top recruits. They got Zion Cruz after Auburn and a couple others dropped out of the race for him. It's just an interesting situation that they find themselves in where they cannot find success no matter what, basically. They've struggled through, I believe it's like 4 coaches now over that span since 2004, 4 or 5. And no one has seemed to put it together, but they also have not gone out and gotten a big fish. One of these like home run hire, he's built every program he's ever had into a winner. And there's one of those out there. And he's got his problems. He's got his red flags. But Will Wade is out there. Now, Will Wade has a show cause from the NCAA. There are new rules that would fine DePaul for choosing to hire him away from McNeese State. So there's a lot of roadblocks in the way of that one. Not the least of which is, would Will Wade take that job? Because I think if you're Will Wade and you take that job, it's an acceptance that you are still multiple steps away from getting back where you want to be. And maybe he goes to DePaul, he loves it there, he builds them into a winner, he decides this is the Big East, I can get everything done I need here. As I said, great location, in theory, a lot of opportunities there. Maybe he decides this is a big enough school for me to get done what I want to and stays. Maybe that happens. But I don't think there's any doubt where he wants to be is at the biggest schools in the sport. He had the LSU job. Even at the LSU job, there had been talk about him potentially having upward momentum to get one of the blue blood jobs. So if he takes this job, it's an admission that he needs to continue to prove himself. Now, I think he's proven quite a bit at McNeese State. I think that's why he's in the mix for this job. You hear his name attached to this one. You'll hear his name at Louisville. You'll hear his name pretty much everywhere that comes open that has the money to get it done. So I think it'll be interesting to see, does anyone pay that penalty to bring him in as their head coach? Is he that much better of a candidate than any of the other coaches that are out there on the market? Some of the other ones that are out there, you look at a Bryce Drew, what he's done at Grand Canyon. Okay, that program was nothing. He built it up into something. Now, he has been at the Power 5, at the Power 6, the high major level, whatever you want to call it. He's been at the high major level before. And he had some success, but never was able to break through. And so eventually he loses his job because Vanderbilt, looking to go upward further through the ladder, they weren't able to do that with him. Now, we've seen at Vanderbilt, there's no guarantee that you get upward push from where he brought you, because they have not moved upward at all from where he had them. They've stayed just about where they were the whole time. So perhaps he maxed out what he could get there. Now at Grand Canyon, we see what he's been able to do. He's had great success. They look like a real NCAA tournament team. So if you're DePaul, do you say, all right, well, look at how he built that program. And Grand Canyon is not like, they don't have the brand, they don't have the location, they don't have any of the stuff that DePaul, that we just talked about DePaul having. So he'll be an interesting name to watch if they want to go that route. And then I think you get into some of the names where you say, well, we have this position, it's not the most desirable, so we can't go get the top guy. And you look at a Tom Crean, who was out of coaching. You look at a couple of other names like that. I think of Mike Bray on the Atlanta Hawks sideline. Not sure if he would be interested in coming back to college basketball. You look at those type of names. Perhaps you can swing somebody in there who has the name recognition, who can get you back in the picture. Or there's somebody not too far away. He understands the recruiting landscape in the Midwest. He has done extremely well. I believe he currently is projected to have an NCAA tournament spot. I'd have to update my numbers, look at that. But Darian DeVries at Drake. Now, you might say, well, why would he leave Drake? He's got things going there. They've been really good the last few years. They have been. But his son, Tucker, he graduates after this season. He's probably off to attempt to make an NBA career. If not, perhaps go overseas, maybe in the G League. Whatever he decides to do, he will probably be in the professional ranks this time next year. So if you're Darian DeVries, do you start fresh? Take a job that's bigger, that probably provides you with more resources than what Drake can offer. Now, it's not a huge step up. It's not like he's getting a Big Ten job, but this DePaul job, there's been reports over the past 24 hours that they are willing to invest, whatever that means, that enough people have had it with this program being just in the mud that they are actually going to try to step up and get a good head coach. That would be a home run hire. A guy who has proven it in the region, a guy who is only becoming available because of the circumstances which are coming up this spring. And I don't know how available he is. Perhaps he loves it at Drake. Perhaps he can get an extension out of this. Perhaps Drake wants to invest in their basketball program beyond this year. So there's so many things that are coming into play here, but those are just a few names that I think should be attached to that DePaul job as we stand today. And then obviously more names will come in. As I said, there's all these different groups of candidates that you kind of go through one by one. You decide which one you want to pick from. If you can't get anyone there, you go to the next one. All right. So you're going to get somebody at DePaul, probably who, if you follow college basketball, I'm going to assume you're going to get somebody that you've heard of before. Like Stubblefield was a top assistant at Oregon before getting this job. Okay, he wasn't unknown. You know who else actually interviewed for that job? John Shire. All right, so they were pulling from a group of candidates. They just picked the wrong one. So what do they do this year? I think they try to go after an established head coach, somebody who they know can bring them what they want. And then if they swing and miss, if other bigger jobs swoop those guys up, if they just can't land the deal, I think then they go to the list of hot assistants, and you hope that this time you get it right and you get your John Shire instead of your Tony Stubblefield. I think that's basically the position that DePaul is in at this point. We'll have more jobs that come open. We'll talk more about those when they happen. Obviously, there's some coaches on the hot seat as well who maybe we expect some of them to be fired. Maybe some of them we aren't sure what's going to happen at this point, but we will talk on the other side about the coaches under the most pressure, not necessarily the hot seat. We'll explain more in the next segment. Thanks for listening right here on 3 True Values. Welcome back into 3 True Values. We're talking about the coaches under the most pressure right now as things stand in late January in college basketball. I think that this list is an interesting list because, like I said, I want to stress this. This is not a hot seat segment. Like, we're not talking about coaches that are going to get fired. Most of these, I think, of my three or four here that we're going to talk about, only one of them I think is in any danger whatsoever of losing his job. And that's Juwan Howard. I think Juwan Howard at Michigan is under a lot of pressure because we know from everything that has gone on, and this dates back to last year, it dates back to the year before, there have been concerns within that program, within that athletic department, about Juwan Howard. This dates back, of course, to the incident with a Wisconsin assistant, some of his sideline behavior, and then we get into this season, he has a heart surgery. Okay, there's nothing, like, I know there's been some conspiracies about that. No, like, I believe he had a heart surgery. right? But then he comes back to the bench as an assistant to Phil Martelli. That was strange. If he's okay to be on the bench and he got a technical foul while on the bench, it's not like he was sitting there and he was checking the notes and he was working the rotations. No, he was involved. He was engaged, but he was the assistant coach. Then reports come out about this incident in the facility, him and a staffer. Some people denied those. Some people said it wasn't as big of a deal as it was made out to be. I don't know. I'm not going to speak on that, but it's something that was out there and people were talking about. Then we watched them play a game where Juwan Howard voluntarily goes to the bench as an assistant. He just lets Phil Martelli coach the team, which I thought was very strange and really doesn't make much sense at all. Like, what do you gain from that? And Juwan Howard, he said all the right things after. He said, life's about experiences. I wanted Phil Martelli to have that experience, all kinds of things. Okay, but Phil Martelli coached multiple games earlier in the season. Like, what was so special about that experience? What made that experience one that he had to have right then, despite your team being right around 500 at the time? Like, you needed to pick up wins. Losses for Michigan, a loss in that situation almost took them completely out of the tournament picture. And he lets his assistant coach take over the reins. What do? They lose the game. Oops. So now, this is a team that's well under 500. They're playing in the Big Ten, so they're not getting any cakewalks the rest of the way. They are going to struggle through the rest of the season. And, I mean, at best, make the NIT. Is that enough to save Juwan Howard's job? I don't know. But I can tell you this. Juwan Howard's job is as much in the hands of himself and how he, A, conducts himself the rest of this season, and B, how he shows the vision for this program. Because I'll be honest, when John Beilein was there, you knew what Michigan was going to be. And you knew every year they were going to bring that same mentality, and they were going to play that way, and they were going to go out there, they were going to perform. With Juwan Howard in the early years, it felt like, okay, I see it, and it has, over the last 2.5 years, fallen apart. I don't know what Michigan's identity is. I don't watch Michigan. I mean, I don't watch Michigan that often in general anymore because they're irrelevant. But when you watch Michigan, you don't watch that team and go, okay, this is what they do. Like, this is where they succeed. This is how they want to win. This is the blueprint. You couple that with recruiting has kind of gone down in the last couple of years. There's just a lot going on there with that program, which should be a Sweet 16, Elite 8 type of program. But they're not there right now. They just aren't. And I'm not sure Juwan Howard can get it back to where it should be at this point. So we will see. He will have to show A, composure, and B, a vision for what he's going to do over the course of this season. That's what's going to be most important to Juwan Howard this year. Second on our list is Eric Musselman. Eric Musselman has a reputation. This dude goes to the NCAA tournament every year. And usually he makes a deep run in the NCAA tournament. Especially at Arkansas. I mean, this is a team that they are making it to the second weekend. You can count on that. But right now, they're not even on the bubble. They are away from the bubble. And the way he's talking about this team, he sounds, and like, look, I'm not saying he's going to. Like, obviously, he's a coach. He's a basketball coach. He has a lot of respect. He gets paid millions of dollars, and he wants these kids to succeed. He wants himself to succeed. So he's not going to give up, but he sounds just about ready to give up in these press conferences. Like, go listen to an Eric Musselman press. It is sad. I mean, he is, like, he's taking responsibility in quotes. Like, he says, you know, it's our job to get them better at this. But he makes it very clear that it's something wrong with this group of guys. There is no chemistry. They don't work the same way that his past teams worked. Like, they're not in the gym in the same way. They're not committed to playing for each other in the same way. They are lacking any sense of team chemistry or of pecking order with this team. And this was always the risk with this year's roster. Now, obviously, I had them picked as a Final Four team. That pick looks terrible right now, but it probably is. It probably was a terrible pick. But I had faith. What I saw was look at all the talent that they were able to bring in. I mean, 1 through 13, that was a deep team in terms of talent, in terms of past production. There was a lot there. And the issue that was always going to be there is how do you keep them all happy? How do you let them all play the role that they want to play, that they're okay with playing, but get those roles all centered on team success? That was going to be an issue, but Eric Musselman had done it so many times before that I blindly accepted that it was going to happen. All right, it hasn't happened. The same way that we blindly accepted that the Michigan State team with a lot of returning talent, with Tom Izzo at the helm, who's been there, he's done it before, he's got the group that he wants. We trusted that they were going to show off that team chemistry. It didn't happen. All right, college basketball, look, it's a team. Every year you might bring back the same players. It's not the same team. Okay, because there's a new dynamic in the locker room when you come back, when you have to decide the new pecking order. Look no further than North Carolina, a team that had all kinds of issues the last couple of years with team chemistry. They look great right now. They seem to have a perfect pecking order. Everyone knows their role. They all play it well. Not what you would have expected. You would have flipped North Carolina with these two teams if you were going to talk about teams that had chemistry problems. But here we are. And so Eric Musselman and Tom Izzo, to some extent, have to get it together. You might not be able to make the NCAA tournament if you're Eric Musselman at this point, but you've got to get it together. Because what you've got to do is you've got to show all the recruits out there, you've got to show all the transfer portal targets out there that you can bring this together. Because next year, what you don't want to happen is there's some kind of dysfunction in the locker room that could be worked out. And you could still go on a deep NCAA tournament run, but they're all thinking about last year when it all just unraveled and it wasn't able to be saved at all. And then they just kind of shut down. They go, all right, well, we're done anyways. Can't have that happen if you're Eric Musselman. And again, Tom Izzo as well is in this conversation as somebody who he's got to bring it together. And I know he's been real angry recently, ranting about analytics, despite analytics being the only thing that's keeping them in the NCAA tournament field right now. So we'll see how that continues to play out. But Tom Izzo, maybe focus on getting your team the best it can be rather than being mad at the computers. And now our final coach that we're going to talk about, Penny Hardaway at Memphis, under a lot of pressure. And this is funny because I don't know what, a week ago, if we were talking about this team, we would have said, wow, they had scraped by in a couple games. You kind of wondered, like, okay, come on, you got to pick it up. And then they did against Wichita State. They blew them out. You thought, wow, that's the team that they have. Suddenly, they dropped 2 really bad games. Their resume, which the computer numbers never liked them because they played all those close games against bad teams. Now it's in trouble because the eye test looks more like the computer numbers than it does what we thought they were before. And now you're introducing Jordan Brown back into the team. He's returned. You've got Penny saying that the team chemistry is terrible right now, that these guys are talking too much, that everyone wants the ball, that it's all the same stuff we were talking about with Arkansas, but it seemed to not be a problem before. Now it is. So they've got a week break here. Penny Hardaway has got to get it figured out. He has got to go in there and make it very clear what the pecking order is, make it very clear what role everyone plays. Because it seems like they've lost it. Somewhere along the way, they've lost their identity and who they are. And look, playing to your competition, you don't want to do it. You want to just go out there and beat every team by 50. But it happens sometimes. It can't happen every time. Because that's when you get in trouble. That's when you go from being a projected 4 seed. Some people had them all the way up to a 3 seed. And now you're on the bubble. That's where you're going to end up if you keep going down this path. So if you're Memphis, if you're Penny Hardaway, you have got to make it known what is the pecking order. Who does what on this team? Because you've got a lot of guys there now, a lot of talented guys, a lot of guys who can play a role, but what role will they play? He's got to get that figured out. He's done it before. We have seen historically these Penny Hardaway teams, February is usually when they start to take off. Like they hit another gear. Because either he gets someone out of the locker room or he convinces them, hey, for the next month and a half, I need you to do it. Then you can go to the portal, you can go wherever you want. But for the next month and a half, I need buy-in because we need to make this run. And usually that's when they've gone from wrong side of the bubble team to 8-9 seed. That's what we've seen in the last few years from this Memphis team. Can they do that this time? But instead it goes from probably a 6 seed right now, maybe a 7. Can they now go, okay, let's flip the switch in February, and suddenly we're back in the 4 seed conversation. I don't know if they can even get up to a 4 seed in terms of resume, but they can get into that 5 conversation, and then you're playing just about, it's pretty similar where you're going to be if you're a 5 seed, 4 seed, whatever. So get back into that area instead of the 6, 7, 8 with the potential to fall into the 9, 10, 11 group. That's where you want to avoid. If you're Penny Hardaway, he's got to get everyone defined roles and make sure that they're actually okay with those roles. And if they're not, sometimes you got to remove them completely. We'll see how it plays out over the course of the next month with all of those coaches and all of their teams. What will they be able to do to show everyone what they can do? When we come back on the other side, we will get you the games of the week and get you out of here on 3 True Values. Not be the best game of the day, but it's a good opportunity to watch a team that we haven't watched. I don't think we've watched them all season. And they are now up into the top 20 in the AP poll. They look like a potential 4 seed, 5 seed with how they've been able to get things going. De'Ron Holmes looks like a potential player of the year candidate. We're talking about Dayton. This Dayton team, very good. They're playing against LaSalle tonight. So tune into that one if you want to get a glimpse of that team. On Wednesday, the choice was easy. We've got Alabama and Auburn. Alabama looks better over recent weeks. They suffered a blowout loss against Tennessee, but Tennessee, one of the best teams in the country. So can they rebound and play better against Auburn? That will be an important one for their resume for sure. On Thursday, not a lot of big games, but we've got Arizona playing. We'll watch them play against Oregon State. Then on Friday, of course, Friday, usually a pretty light schedule, but we've got a good one this week. We've got Michigan State. Tom Izzo, what can he do? He needs some resume building wins. They're playing against Wisconsin on a Friday night. That will be an important game for both of those teams. On Saturday, I'm tempted. There's a couple of ways we can go. Of course, there's always a big list of games, but we're going to go outside the box here, actually, and we're going to go with Utah State, Boise State. Boise State continues to pick up big wins, but they've also dropped a couple of games. Utah State looks like they could keep rising up the board. This is the deepest Mountain West Conference we have ever seen. It's one of the best conferences in college basketball, period, with what they've been able to put out on the floor so far. So let's watch some Mountain West basketball. Then on Sunday, of course, another light slate, but we're going to watch more Mountain West basketball. This is going to be a Mountain West weekend. We're going to watch New Mexico against Nevada, two more NCAA tournament caliber teams. I think for sure in the field as of now, both of those teams. So want to get a glimpse of that. And then on Monday, we go with Houston and Texas. Texas still needs more resume building wins. They got one over the past week. They got to keep getting them. They've got to build that resume because right now they are on the bubble in Rodney Terry's first year as full-time head coach. We'll be back here this time next week to talk to you more about all things college basketball right here on 3 True Values. Thanks for listening.